If you had told me 3 years ago that the President of the United States would come to my wedding, I'd have laughed you out of the room. But there I was, standing under an arch of pale wildflowers, clutching David's hand so tightly that our knuckles turned white while my mother's voice dripped like poison into my ear. She didn't even wait until the vows. Of course not. That would have required her to show some semblance of respect. And respect was something my mother only reserved for people she deemed worthy. I had learned painfully that I would never be one of them. "Look at this," she hissed, her wine glass glittering in the summer sun. "Just look around you, Emma." I dared to glance. The field behind the old stone chapel was sprinkled with wooden benches and folding chairs. My friends from the legal aid office were there laughing with David's cousins. My best friend Tanya was fussing with my veil she'd flown in from across the country just to stand beside me. But in my mother's eyes, none of these people mattered. Not my friends who'd pulled all-nighters with me during law school. Not my college professors who'd guided me through my clerkships. Not David's family who'd embraced me like their own. No, they were nothing to her. "Mother, please," I started, my voice trembling. She leaned closer, her perfume expensive suffocating, enveloping me. "No one important came," she said, her tone cold as marble. "I told you we should have done it at the country club. You could have had senators, judges, real people. But no, you wanted your little backyard wedding. Look at you now." I could feel my heart thudding in my chest, a drumbeat of shame and anger. I wanted to scream, to tell her that these people were my people. They'd held me when I'd fallen apart after the bar exam, brought me soup. When I was sick, helped me move apartments 3 times in 4 years. They were important to me. Why wasn't that enough for her? But the words stuck in my throat. They always did when it came to her. "Emma." David's hand squeezed mine. His dark eyes searched my face, concern flickering across his handsome features. "Everything okay?" My mother plastered on her practiced smile, her lips barely curling. "Of course, darling," she purred, already drifting away to another cluster of guests she could silently judge. Just giving my daughter some last-minute advice. As she vanished into the crowd, I realized I hadn't breathed properly in at least a minute. My chest hurt. David leaned closer, his forehead touching mine. "Ignore her," he whispered. "She doesn't know what she's talking about." I wanted to believe him, but her words had sunk their claws into my chest, and they wouldn't let go. The ceremony itself was a blur, a haze of flowers, laughter, and promises, whispered under the summer sun. When David slipped the ring onto my finger, a small spark of warmth spread through me. This is real, I thought. This is mine. But even as we walked back down the aisle to the cheers of our friends, I could feel my mother's eyes boring into my back like icy daggers. The reception was in full swing when it happened. We were midway through the toasts. Tanya, bless her soul, was halfway through a speech that had everyone howling with laughter. David's best man had just finished regaling the crowd with a story about how David once got lost on a hiking trail, and Emma, that's me, had to call search and rescue. It was mortifying, but it made people laugh, and for a while I felt the darkness lifting. Then I heard it, a low, rhythmic rumble, like thunder, but steadier. At first I thought maybe it was a passing truck, but the sound grew louder, closer. The laughter faltered as heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Even the band stopped playing the guitarist's last chord hanging in the air like a question. "Is that sirens?" someone whispered. Then I saw the flashing blue lights at the far end of the gravel driveway. A motorcade, black SUVs, shiny and ominous, crawling forward in a perfect formation. Secret Service agents in dark suits stepped out, scanning the surroundings with sharp eyes. My mother, standing near the makeshift bar, dropped her wine glass. It shattered at her feet, red liquid spreading like blood across the white linen. "Emma," she breathed, her face pale. "What is this?" I didn't answer, because in that moment, I was just as stunned as she was. The last SUV door opened, and out stepped the President of the United States. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones appeared like mushrooms after a rainstorm. A few guests instinctively applauded, though nobody really knew if that was appropriate. The president, tall, charismatic, and so oddly familiar in person, walked straight toward me. He smiled, and in that smile I saw the echoes of a memory I hadn't touched in years. "Emma Daniels," he said warmly. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." I blinked. "Mr. President, you came?" He laughed. "Of course I did." Then he turned to the stunned guests, raising his voice so everyone could hear. "I want you all to know something about this woman you're here to celebrate. When I was just a junior senator, nobody really. Emma fought for my family when she didn't have to. She risked her career. She did the right thing, not the easy thing." My mother's hand clutched the back of a chair. I could see her mind whirring, trying to grasp how her daughter, her disappointment of a daughter, could possibly know the most powerful man in the country. The president turned to my mother, his smile polite but sharp as a knife. "You said no one important came today. I'd argue everyone here is important because they love Emma. That makes them the most important people in this world." The crowd erupted. David slipped his arm around my waist, beaming. And for the first time that day, the shame melted away, replaced by something else, pride. My mother. She didn't say another word for the rest of the night. The music started up again, but it was different now, softer, more reverent. Like the orchestra knew this moment was no longer just about the wedding. This was a reckoning. People began whispering. I could feel their eyes on me, but for once it didn't sting. It was almost freeing. Emma David's mom, sweet and sensible in her lilac dress, touched my shoulder gently. "Did you know?" I nodded, my throat dry. Sort of. I didn't know he'd actually come. The president, I still stumbled over that title in my mind, was talking to my father now. Dad was flushed pink with a pride he'd never shown when I'd made law review when I'd won my first court case. Now he looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. My mother, though, she hovered on the fringes like a ghost. Her lips pressed so tightly together they were almost white. Tanya tugged me aside, nearly tripping on the hem of her dress. "Okay, you crazy woman. What is going on? Why didn't you ever tell me you know him?" I laughed. It came out brittle like old glass. I didn't think it mattered. Mattered? "Emma, you are the most annoyingly humble person I know. You helped the president's family?" I shrugged. "I was an intern. I did my job." "Girl." Tanya pulled me into a hug. "You did more than your job. You changed lives." I swallowed. Her words sank in deeper than I expected. I'd spent so long downplaying that story, terrified it would sound like bragging, and my mother always hated when I made myself look too big. But now I wished I'd told this truth sooner. Maybe I would have realized I didn't need her approval to feel proud of who I was. It was a cramped room in the basement of a legal aid clinic. The ceiling leaked during rainstorms. The paint peeled like old scabs. I was 20, fresh out of undergrad, green enough to believe that one person could change the world. Her name was Marisol Sanchez. She had dark hair eyes that didn't quite meet mine at first, and a little boy who clung to her leg like a second shadow. She was about to be deported for missing a single hearing, a hearing she'd never received the notice for. The firm I was interning at, all gray suits and billable hours, wouldn't touch her case. Too complicated, they said. Too messy. But I couldn't sleep at night knowing she'd be ripped away from her son. So I went to my supervisor at the clinic. We filed emergency motions, rallied local reporters. I spent nights on a cot in that basement office, poring over legal precedents with a flashlight because the overhead light flickered too much. I didn't know until much later that Marisol was the sister of then-Senator Howard. She never told me. All I knew was that she was scared, and that fear made me furious at the system that tried to swallow her whole. When the judge ruled in her favor, she fell to her knees in the hallway and sobbed. Her son, maybe 4 years old, tugged my sleeve and asked if I'd come to his birthday party. I did. I bought him a little toy train. I never expected anything from it. Years later, that little boy would stand next to his uncle as he was sworn in as president. And now that same man was here because he never forgot the girl who refused to look away. The sun dipped lower in the sky. Paper lanterns swayed overhead, catching the golden glow like little orbs of magic. David stood by my side, his hand a steady anchor at the small of my back. The president cleared his throat and clinked a fork against his glass. The chatter died instantly. "I hope you'll indulge me one more toast," he said, voice warm yet commanding. "I'm not here as your president tonight. I'm here as a brother, as an uncle, and as a friend." He glanced at me, eyes softening. Emma Daniels taught me that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one nobody sees coming. She fought for my sister when it would have been so much easier to walk away. She reminded me long before I ever thought of running for this job that our country works best when we fight for the people who can't fight for themselves. A few people wiped their eyes. I felt David squeeze my fingers. The president turned to my mother, who looked as if she might dissolve into the grass. "I heard someone say that no one important came today." His words were gentle, but they carved through the air like a scalpel. But I believe the measure of importance is not fame or money or titles. It's the love we carry, the sacrifices we make, the lives we touch. He raised his glass toward us. "So here's to Emma and David, two people whose love story reminds us all that kindness is the greatest power of all." The guests erupted in cheers. David pulled me in for a kiss, and when we broke apart, I saw my mother's eyes glistening. But whether they were tears of regret, anger, or something else I couldn't tell yet. It was inevitable. After the dancing, the cake, the stolen moments on the patio where David whispered, "Can you believe this against my neck?" It was inevitable she'd find me alone. I was gathering up my train to sneak away for a breath of air when I felt her presence like a cold draft. "You humiliated me," she spat, voice low and venomous. I turned slowly, my veil trailing behind me like a phantom limb. "I didn't do anything, Mother. You didn't warn me." She stepped closer. Her makeup had smudged around the edges, a stark contrast to her rigid posture. "You knew he was coming? You let me make a fool of myself." I shook my head, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "I didn't know. And if I had, I wouldn't have told you." Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me, because you don't get to decide who matters anymore. Not here, not to me." For the first time in my life, I saw something crack in her expression. A fissure of vulnerability quickly patched over by rage. "Everything I've ever done, the schools, the clubs, the connections, it was all for you?" she snapped. "No, Mother. It was for you. And I'm done pretending that my life has to look like your idea of success." She opened her mouth closed. It opened it again. "You think you're so important now. You think you've won." I smiled, not cruelly, but with a tired grace I hadn't known I had. "No, I think I finally know what important means, and it was never about you." The next morning, the headlines exploded. "President attends small wedding to thank hero bride." My name trended for the first time in my life. David and I read the articles curled up in bed at the little B&B we'd booked for our wedding night. He traced lazy circles on my bare shoulder while I scrolled through the photos, the motorcade, the stunned guests, my mother frozen mid-glare. "Do you think she'll ever forgive me?" I asked. "Do you want her to?" he murmured. That was the question. Wasn't it? I rolled over to face him, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "I don't know. Maybe forgiveness isn't the point. Maybe it's just letting go." He kissed my palm. "Then let's let go. Together." Outside the window, the sun rose over the hills, spilling gold across a world I was finally ready to claim as mine. If you've never felt your entire family dissect your life like a reality TV show, count yourself lucky. The morning after the wedding, the brunch buffet at the B&B looked like a Pinterest dream. Rustic bread baskets, freshly squeezed orange juice, Tiny chalkboard signs labeling each quiche. But the moment I walked in with David, it felt like I'd stepped onto a courtroom witness stand. Whispers stopped dead. Forks clinked against porcelain. I saw my Aunt Diana lean over to my cousin, probably repeating the same line she'd told me since I was 12, Emma's nice, but she's not exactly impressive. This time, though, they all had to reframe their stories. I sat next to my dad, who cleared his throat as if revving up for a speech. "So, the president, huh?" I busied myself buttering a scone. "Yeah." He nudged his reading glasses up his nose. "Why didn't you ever tell us you knew him?" I shrugged. It wasn't about me. My mother, seated opposite me in a crisp cream blouse, stabbed her fork into a slice of melon so viciously the tines snapped. She shot me a glare so cold I thought the carafe of coffee might freeze on the spot. Uncle Bruce leaned in, voice way too loud. "You gonna work for him now? Be some big-shot lawyer in Washington." I glanced at David, who gave me the faintest nod. If there was ever a time to claim my own story, it was now. Maybe I said evenly, "He wants to launch a new community initiative pro bono clinics policy work. Real change on the ground. I might run it." Silence. Then Aunt Diana scoffed. "Is that really what you want? Or are you just doing it for the attention?" The old me might have shrunk at that. But the new me, the me who'd watched the most powerful man in the country toast my name in front of my mother. She just smiled. "It's not about attention," I said, my voice calm, steady. "It's about doing something that matters." My mother slammed her napkin down. "This is ridiculous," she hissed. "You think this makes you better than everyone? You're still my daughter?" "My daughter, don't forget that." I met her eyes. "I haven't forgotten. But I don't need your permission anymore." That afternoon, while David dozed upstairs, I sat alone on the porch swing. My phone buzzed with messages. Old law professors, journalists wanting quotes. Even Marisol herself. He told me he was going. He said he wanted to show the world how much you did for us. "I'm so proud of you, Emma." I reread her message 3 times, tears welling up. Then my phone rang, an unknown number with a DC area code. "Emma Daniels." The voice was crisp, professional. "This is Laura Kelly from the President's Community Outreach Office. He asked me to reach out personally." My breath caught. "Hi." "Wow. Okay. He wants to know if you'd consider a more permanent role Director of Community Justice Initiatives. You'd help craft policy, train new lawyers, expand legal clinics nationwide." I stared at the fields stretching out from the porch, golden and endless. "That sounds huge." "He trusts you," Laura said simply. "We all do." After I hung up, I sat there for a long time. I thought about the girl who used to lie awake at night, wondering if she'd ever make her parents proud, the one who thought real worth only came when someone else said so. I knew what I had to do. Word spread like wildfire. By the time David and I got back to the city, my phone was an inferno of gossip. Distant relatives who never called suddenly wanted to catch up. Old classmates slid into my messages like we'd been best friends since birth. But not everyone was thrilled. 2 nights later, my mother showed up at our apartment. No call, no warning. Just a stiff rap on the door that made David look like he'd seen a ghost. "Emma," she said, stepping inside before I could stop her. She was dressed for battle hair, pinned back tight pearls at her throat like armor. "Mom, what are you doing here?" She didn't waste time. "I've been thinking. This position, it's political. It'll drag you into the spotlight. It's not good for your reputation." I folded my arms. "I don't care about my reputation. I care about what it means." "You're my daughter," she snapped. "You don't get to embarrass this family again." My laugh was hollow. "Embarrass? You humiliated me at my own wedding." "Mother, you humiliated me." Her voice cracked. "Do you have any idea what they're saying at the club?" The whispers, the questions about how you tricked your way into this. I stared at her, really stared. For the first time, I realized how small she looked, weighed down by the world she'd built like a prison around herself. "Is that all you care about?" I asked, voice trembling. "Your stupid social circle." She flinched. "Don't talk to me like that. Then don't treat me like I'm your project. I'm your daughter, and I'm done living like your accessory." She took a step forward, her eyes glistening. "Emma?" "No." I held up a hand. "You don't get to do this, not anymore." Behind me, I felt David's hand on my shoulder, warm, steady. My anchor. My mother turned on her heel and walked out. This time, I didn't feel guilt twist in my stomach. I felt free. Over the next few weeks, the story grew. My phone buzzed with invitations, interviews, charity events, panels. Everyone wanted to know about the hero lawyer bride who'd caught the president's eye. It was terrifying and exhilarating. David stood by me every step. When I doubted myself, he'd wrap his arms around me and whisper, "You were always this woman. You just didn't let yourself see it." But at night, when the world went quiet, I wondered if I'd made a mistake with my mother. Should I have tried harder? Should I have bent just to keep the peace? Then I'd remember her eyes, that cold fear of losing her grip, and I'd remember that some things need to break so something new can grow. 2 months later, my first big event as Director of Community Justice Initiatives arrived, a black tie gala to raise funds for expanding legal aid clinics nationwide. The president was the keynote speaker, but I was the story everyone wanted. The lights of the ballroom sparkled like a city of stars. Reporters hovered like curious fireflies, microphones poised. I stood at the podium, fingers trembling. David caught my eye from the front row. He mouthed, "You've got this." And I did. I told my story about Marisol, about that tiny basement office, about believing that one act of courage can echo for generations. When I stepped down, the room erupted in applause. But before I could even catch my breath, I saw her, my mother, standing near the back, dressed in simple black, no pearls, no stiff chignon, just her. She looked older than I remembered. She came forward as the crowd parted around her like water. "Emma," she said, her voice thin but steady. "Can we talk?" The gala glittered behind us like a fairy tale I never imagined living. But here in this little corridor off the ballroom, just me and my mother, everything felt heartbreakingly real. I studied her face. For once, there was no perfect mask, no cutting smile. She looked like the woman in the old Polaroids in our attic, the young mom who'd once danced with me in the kitchen in fuzzy socks. She cleared her throat, voice catching. "You were incredible tonight." I swallowed. "Thank you." Her fingers twisted the hem of her clutch. I wanted to say, "I'm sorry." I blinked. I hadn't realized how badly I'd needed to hear those words until they cracked something open inside me. "I was wrong," she went on, eyes glistening. "About all of it. About you." I thought, if you could just be impressive enough, important enough, I'd feel like I'd done my job. "Mother." "No." She held up a hand. "Let me say it, please." I stayed quiet. She pressed on. "When your father left us that first year, you don't even remember you were so little. I made a promise to myself you'd never be looked down on the way I was. I built this whole world, the clubs, the parties, the country house, all, so no one would ever say we weren't good enough again." She laughed, a broken, shaky sound. "But I lost you along the way, didn't I?" My throat tightened. "Mom, you didn't lose me. You just never saw me." Her lip trembled. "I see you now, Emma. And you are so much more than I ever dared hope for." We stood there for a long time, the distant music and laughter muffled by the thick velvet drapes. "I'm proud of you," she said finally. "I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, but I want to try. If you'll let me." I closed my eyes, feeling the tide of old anger and heartbreak rolling through me. She'd hurt me. She'd belittled my dreams, torn at my confidence, made me doubt my own worth. But in this moment, her voice was so small, just a mother asking her child for one more chance. I thought of Marisol, of the president's toast, of David's hand squeezing mine when the motorcade arrived. I thought of the girl who once believed that forgiveness was weakness. Then I realized forgiveness was strength. It was letting go not for her sake, but for mine. I reached out, took her hand. "We'll try. One step at a time." She let out a breath I didn't know she'd been holding. And in that moment, I saw her not as the flawless, impossible mother I'd tried so hard to please, but as a flawed human woman who was trying her best, just like me. The gala wrapped up in a swirl of flashes and congratulations. Reporters begged for sound bites, but I was done performing. Tonight wasn't about headlines. It was about the people I'd fight for tomorrow. Outside, under a canopy of string lights, David found me. He tugged me close, pressing his forehead to mine. "How do you feel?" I smiled. Light, like I can finally breathe. He spun me under the stars. The band inside played something slow, and we danced barefoot on the dew-damp grass. My mother stood near the edge of the terrace, watching with tired, hopeful eyes. For once, she didn't look like she was measuring the moment against some impossible standard. She just looked grateful. "Think she'll change?" David murmured. "I don't know." I rested my head on his shoulder. "But I know I have." The president's motorcade was long gone, but his words stayed with me. Important isn't who you know, it's who you lift up when nobody's watching. 3 years later, I stood in front of a brand new legal aid office, the 5th one we'd opened under the Community Justice Initiative. A line of families wrapped around the block. People who'd never have to fight alone again. David held our daughter on his hip, her tiny hand clutching a plush toy train, a nod to the little boy who'd once asked me to come to his birthday party. And my mother. She was inside helping serve coffee to clients waiting for their consultations. No pearls, no country club airs, just a grandmother doting on her granddaughter between pouring cups of lukewarm brew. Sometimes redemption isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as showing up again and again until trust grows back like a wildflower through cracked pavement. When I cut the ribbon that day, I looked at the people gathered at friends, neighbors, clients, my family. No one important came, my mother had once said. Now I knew the truth. Everyone important came. They always do when you fight for what matters.